Alan Sherry, and I am the chair of the Community Learning Development Standards Council for Scotland. And currently, I am the acting principal at South Lanarkshire College, and previously I was the principal at Glasgow Kelvin College and John Wheatley College. I've been asked to give some thoughts about the use of performance indicator data within the college sector and respond to the comments made by college lecturers to the questions posed about the use of performance indicators within colleges. Firstly, I think I'd like to highlight that there is a recognition of the complexity of how this data is used. Firstly, there's the challenge on managers who are required to report back against this data set. They're required for several reasons. One is around the notion of evaluation and what does that mean for the impact on learners. One is around the importance of data that's attached to that data attached by HMI when considering the performance of colleges. One is the need to report back to the Funding Council, and thirdly, there's that notion of what people may deem to be the effectiveness of the college experience. I think there's challenges in all those aspects of why we collect data. And to be blunt, in the first instance, my view is we only collect the data that we can collect. We collect the data that fits neatly into spreadsheets, and we collect the data that can easily be produced into tables and measured. It doesn't, in any shape or form, reflect the totality of the student experience, the quality of learning and teaching in the main, or what the learner has gained from that experience. It only records attainment and doesn't record wider achievement. So in that sense, we have to say, well, that's the data, but the data needs context. I think there's also an issue in terms of how staff use the data. And I accept that the use of the data by teaching staff colleagues tends to be predicated on what they think their managers want. There's a reluctance to challenge the data set and say, this isn't fit for purpose. And here are some indicators which I believe would be better for the college to use to evaluate the quality of the learner experience. There's a reluctance to put the data in context, merely just to report back against the bold figures. You know, this course is up, this course is down. We all know there are complex reasons for learner attainment fluctuating. We all know that there are factors that the college can control, but we also know there are factors that are totally out with the control of the college. So on that basis, staff need to engage more fully with their managers around that and need to kick back about why we collect this data and the purpose of collecting it. There is a kind of piece around how trade unions see the data and see it as, again, a means of not helping to change the educational experience, but a means of managing staff. I don't think that's helpful in the sense is that it creates a view that the data has no place. I think we should be arguing that the data has a place. However, what we need to do is put it within the context and tell people that it is only part of a view of how we assess, evaluate and reflect on the support that's offered to learners, learner attainment and learner achievement. We have to realise that for the vast majority of learners, attaining their qualification is central to what they want to do, how they intend to progress either to further study or to employment. But there is more to that, and there's more to the totality of the educational experience. The government, the Scottish Government in particular, like data. They have a national performance framework which is broadly based on data sets, and they like that approach that they can easily give that data back and say, we've invested X and it's produced Y. I think we have a role to challenge that view, to say, yes, you've invested public money, but there's more to education. And there's more to what we offer within the context of the college system than simply students attaining. However, we have to realise that if students don't attain and don't progress, particularly in the current environment, colleges will not be successful in bidding against other public sector providers for money to deliver. And we need to be realistic about that, regrettable though that may be. The funding body clearly uses this data in its interaction with colleges to influence how colleges perform. They see that as key, and they're looking, and I think increasingly will look at how does this data impact on their view of an effective college. I have a concern that going forward, that it's likely that colleges will be funded directly on the performance against that data set. And therefore, those colleges who deal with the most challenging students are prepared to take greater risks in ensuring that everyone has access to college education may be penalised if those learners don't progress as well as others. And I think there's a big case to be made for us to argue against that approach. But we need to be coherent. We need to recognise that we can't simply say that's not right. We need to argue why it isn't correct, what the disadvantages are, and what the impact that will have on colleges in their attempt to create a fairer Scotland. So for me, we need to start marshalling those arguments. And the best people to do that are college lecturers, because you're the people who use this data set, who understand the data set, understand how it can be used effectively, but also understand its limitations. I also, in my experience, have thought there's been different approaches to how different colleges use data. Some colleges, it's the focus of everything. It drives curriculum planning, it drives funding, it drives staffing. In other colleges, it's seen as an element to be considered in the context of what the college is seeking to do, its broader mission, and its commitment to the communities that it serves. I believe that lecturers need to be engaged in that debate more fully. I believe that they need to be arguing for a broader review of what influences the college culture, what influences effective learning experience, and what impact that would have and what benefit that would bring to all those who attend the college. That's going to be difficult to do. I have to say, I'm of a view now, if I hear someone else say they're data driven, that I'm kind of sorely tempted to drive a stake through their heart. Data in its own without context is meaningless. It only tells you what you already know. Everything has to be put in a context, and the context of each college is different, and the emphasis you would put on data changes, and the emphasis of what aspects of data and on what aspects of the data set you place also changes depending on the context in which your college operates. We can't escape from the Scottish Government's priorities because we're a publicly funded body, and as public servants we have to deliver on that, but we can help shape that environment rather than just say we don't think that it works. In my view, we need to work at balanced, informed analysis that takes cognizance of the data set, that reflects on the wider context, ensures that wider achievement is given the credit that it deserves and is acknowledged as a key part of the learner experience, and also demonstrate what we do fits in with the broader agendas of the Scottish Government, such as how do we create a fairer and more inclusive Scotland. And clearly that in itself is central to what we should be doing as college practitioners. I don't think you can look at PI data without having a good value set. The values of what makes an institution, the values of the sector, and the professional values of all teaching staff within colleges. The profession values, commitment, knowledge, understanding, and skills. But those values need to go into action in terms of how we support our learners. And that means that we can't solely be driven by what the data tells us at the top level. We need to understand what the data is telling us below that. We need to understand that sometimes the data will tell us something about learning and teaching and how we perform as classroom practitioners. Sometimes it will tell us about how we recruit students, and sometimes it will tell us about how appropriate assessment procedures are. We can't reject any of that, but it is not the only way of assessing it. And again, you need to use your professional judgment to make sure that it's done in the right way to the benefit of your learners and to the benefits of the totality of the college. And it's clear to me, and in my experience, that the best practitioners take the data that's available, reflect on what it tells them within the context in which they're operating, explore those elements that it indicates require further exploration, but it's not mindlessly accepting that this data is the only driver for change or improvement or modification. It is only part of a complex jigsaw, and those decisions based on that data and within that context have to be grounded firmly in professional values. And intrinsically, the key professional value for the college sector, along with the rest of the Scottish education, has to be the creating of a fairer, more equal society where people have the opportunity to have sustainable employment within an appropriate context. Our professional identities should not be bound up simply on a PI data set. League tables are pointless. In my professional experience, I've taught at a college in a city centre where, to be blunt, students would probably have succeeded irrespective of what happened. I have worked in the poorest communities of Glasgow for the vast majority of my career and appreciate the difficulty our learners had in sustaining college. And any success at college was a huge success, both in terms of their educational progression, but also their personal progression and their confidence and how they saw the world. And for me, we need to recognise that that's our role within that context. Our professional identity has to be bound up with the students that we serve. Moving forward, I would argue that we need a more complex system of evaluating and identifying the benefits of the college system. One that includes the recognition of wider achievement, one of which should include how we signpost meta skills and what those meta skills mean in terms of ensuring that people are equipped for lifelong learning, which is going to be central to everyone, and ensuring that they can participate meaningfully in society at all levels, both as citizens and within the context of the economy. For me, we need to look at ourselves as practitioners and agree that this is what we're trying to do. FE is going to change radically, in my view, in the next 5 to 10 years. Demography will change the nature of the sector. Our emphasis at the moment on full-time is unlikely to survive. We are going to have to develop micro-credentials. We're going to have to recognise that learners are going to drop in and drop out, that full-time courses probably are going to be very limited, and that the vast majority of what we'll do will be tailored to meet specific individual needs and or small groups in order that people can either move on to employment or stay within the employment they have or deal with the complex changes that are coming within the context of society. That means that it's going to be difficult to run a PI data set based on centrally devised awards. Therefore, we now need to start thinking about how will we ensure that our contribution to a successful Scotland is reflected adequately in that brave new world. Hopefully, these are some thoughts that will give you an opportunity to reflect on practice, and an opportunity to explore further what you think is needed in order to identify the key criteria which would identify a successful Scottish educational experience. Thank you.